So I've just started the recording of this open meeting in compliance with CMS. For the record, prior to doing so, I announced that Palmetto GBA would make an audio recording of the open meeting and consented on behalf of Palmetto GBA. So again, I'd like to welcome everyone to our open meeting today. Palmetto GBA did not receive any requests for presentation regarding any of the proposed LCDs that are out for comment. I would like to remind everyone that if you would like to make a formal comment on any of our proposed policies, that we encourage those to be done in writing. And those written comments can be submitted to a.policy@palmettogba.com. That's the letter a.policy@palmettogba, that's all one word, .com. So one more time, a.policy@palmettogba.com. And those, we will take comments on or before May the 14th, 2022. May the 14th is the last day for comments. So again, we do encourage you to send those comments in writing. That is the preferred way. It's a very important part of the LCD process. If we are able to get these comments in writing, that will allow us to adequately address each of those comments in the response to comments articles that are associated with each proposed policy.
Dr. Stroud?
Yes.
Hey, this is Dr. Banker. Just in case we're getting ready to close this out, I did scan the folks on the call today, and I know there are at least a couple who did not register for any formal presentation, but would like to make just some informal comments on the allogenic stem cell.
Yes. I'm going to allow that. I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Banker.
All right. I'm sorry for interrupting. I just wasn't sure.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to quickly say that we cannot directly address any comments or questions on this conference call today, nor can we accept any new presentations today. That being said, however, yes, if there is anyone that would like to make any brief comments on any of our proposed policies, I will open up the floor at this time.
Dr. Stroud, hi, this is Diana Howard. I'm a physician from Wake Forest, and
yes.
If appropriate, I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for having this, and also I just want to say a special thank you to Drs. Garrett and Banker because they have been really supportive of my request and others for this effort. I appreciate Palmetto GBA taking this interest on. This effort, as you know, is endorsed by the American Society of Hematologists, by the American Society of Transplant and Cell Therapy, and by the National Marrow Donor Program, or Be the Match. And these are organizations that represent my field, hematologists that do blood cancers and transplant, and all of our patients. And I also just want you to hear that, this, while a lot of attention on CAR T and cell therapies and things like that these days, but there's still a very relevant place for allogeneic stem cell transplant in lymphoma patients, and for the small percent of patients for whom, this is important and relevant. It is the only curative intent therapy. And I just want people to know this is a really unmet need for those patients, and it's particularly affecting Medicare beneficiaries because of the disparity in access to this care. If you're a Medicare beneficiary, that is really disparate and not equitable to what's afforded patients with commercial insurance. So that's the main thing I want everyone to hear. And again, I really appreciate Palmetto GBA, the medical directors, and Drs. Garrett and Banker for helping us with this.
All right. Well, thank you very much for those comments. Anybody else that's on this conference call, if you have any brief comments, please go ahead and share those.
Hi, good morning. This is Wendy Kiss, Field Reimbursement Manager with Pfizer Oncology.
Yes.
To echo those words, thank you all to all the medical directors and Melissa Robinson for the coordination and allowing the opportunity for these public meetings. And given that, my question is, are you all considering moving to a live meeting option now that there's less risk with the current COVID environment?
Thanks, Wendy. At this time, I do not know the answer to that. Melissa, I don't know if there's any really way to know that at this point. Is there?
We have not received any further communication regarding going back live at this point. We are still in the process of transitioning back in person ourselves. So I don't foresee that occurring anytime in the future, unfortunately. But that's the only update I would be able to provide at this time.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the update. Appreciate
welcome.
it.
All right, anybody else? If there are none, we will have our JJ open meeting. That will start at 12:30 Eastern Time. I again want to thank everyone for being on the call this morning. I know it's a short meeting, but again, we do encourage everyone to, if you want have any formal comments, please submit those in writing to a.policy@palmettogba.com. Again, this is a very important part of the LCD process. We certainly value your comments. Again, that will give us a way to adequately address any comment that's made for any of our proposed LCDs. If there is,
Dr. Stroud,
yes.
Dr. Stroud, I'm sorry, I was having trouble logging in, so I missed the first 2
that's
minutes
okay.
here. Today was the day for doing the open meeting and doing presentations for the LCD. I'm concerned about my LCD, the podiatry one.
Yes, I made an announcement earlier that for the JM open meeting, we had no submitted presentations for JM. We do have that one for JJ. We can't address directly any comments or questions on this call, but if there is any comments that you would like to make, then I'm certainly can open up the floor and let you do that.
Okay. All right. Would it be okay for me to speak?
Sure, go ahead. Yes.
Okay. Okay. I guess I'm some of the terminology I'm not aware. What's the JJ and the JM? Those are the two different jurisdictions.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So the JM jurisdiction consists of North and South Carolina, West Virginia, and Virginia. The JJ jurisdiction consists of Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee.
Okay, but the proposed LCD would go into effect for both jurisdictions. The one I'm concerned about is the nail procedure 39-258. They would go for both jurisdictions. So it'd be okay for me to speak about my concerns. We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I sent in my comments to you. I think the main concern that I have is the studies that they're using. Most of the studies, they had prior ingrown nails, and the LCD asserts that, if you do a permanent procedure, you may not need a nail procedure again the rest of your life. Even the studies were using people that already had prior nail procedures, and they still had recurrence. Also, it seemed, by the way the LCD was written, it seemed to try to time how long does it take a nail to regrow after a nail procedure is done. Whereas the nail, when it has onychocryptosis or a pincer nail, the nail continues to deform. So even if you remove 10% or 15%, the remaining portion of the nail can continue to form, and then that becomes ingrown, even if the portion you decided to remove never comes back. And I don't know that it really addressed that. I think there's some good parts to that LCD that, people truly need to be doing a nail procedure. They should be using anesthesia. They should be doing a nail procedure. And that should weed out the people that aren't really doing the procedure and billing for it. But the people that are really doing a permanent nail procedure, there's issues. The way this is written, unfortunately, the codes are per toe. So you might do a medial border, and, coding for the other border could be a problem, because the other border certainly could get ingrown. Also, even if you do a permanent matrixectomy and you did 10% or 15%, the remaining portion of the nail could get ingrown. I think some access to care is going to be a problem. This epidemiology article, I've read all these articles, and it affects the poor, it affects the elderly, and it has a higher incidence in the Southeast United States, that's us. I think that's the main takeaways. I read every reference, and none of the references really corroborated that nails don't get re-ingrown. By reading all of them, it said they do get re-ingrown. That's my concern. I think Ira Kraus maybe presented it nicer and clearer than I do, but that's my concern, is that even done properly, people are going to need access to this kind of care. It's a very powerful procedure that can keep people out of the hospital and stop cellulitis and do a lot of things for beneficiaries.
Well, thank you, Dr. Harwood. Yeah, I appreciate those comments, and I did, yes, we did receive the comments, written comments from you, and we will certainly address those. Dr. Kraus will be making a presentation at our JJ open meeting, which will be at 12:30 Eastern time. So if you'd like to rejoin us again there, that's fine. But I really do appreciate you making these comments for the JM open meeting, since we did not have any registered presentations for this meeting.
Yes, sir. Well, I appreciate you letting me talk, and Ira and myself are more than happy to be involved. I think he was asking about how we could try and help give our comments before it gets too far down the path. Anyway, we appreciate all the attention, and thank you for letting me speak.
No, thank you.
Hey, this is Ira Kraus. I wanted to just ask you, I'm not able to get on with the Teams link. I was supposed to do my presentation at 12:35.
Yes.
And the Teams link is not letting me on. So I've dialed in just to let you know that it's not working, that I'm not getting let into the meeting.
Okay. Melissa, let's work with Dr. Kraus, make sure we can get that presentation for the 12:30 meeting.
We had trouble too.
Okay.
Will, and there are two separate links. There was a link for
We
the
had trouble too. We had
separate link for the JJ, so that may be the issue.
So I received an email, just so you know, this is Dr. Kraus. I received an email with a link for the Teams and actually the conference ID number with a call. And actually my conference ID number did not work either. I actually had to get a conference ID number from one of my colleagues. So I'm not sure if there was something wrong with the email that I received telling me that my speaking time is at 12:35, but actually none of my login information is working. I'm
And
using
that
someone else's
information leads
email.
for the 12:30 meeting and not this particular meeting, because there were two different conference ID numbers and two different links. But
Okay.
I'll make sure that you have the correct one for the 12:30 call.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll go back on mute and just listen.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Kraus, for letting us know that. Thanks, Melissa. Anyone else have any comments before we wrap the JM meeting up?
Yes, I would like to, this is Dr. Smith, Dr. Keoka Smith out of South Carolina.
Yes.
I just want to say a couple things. I submitted a formal comment, but I wanted to go on record here just to reiterate a couple of things the doctor said earlier. The main 2 points, though, are concerning the enforceability of the changes to the limitations to the LCD. Because there's no modifier or indication for medial and lateral borders, nor is there a way to separate whether we're doing a partial or total avulsion. It makes it difficult for Palmetto GBA to know exactly what's being done, because if we do a medial border, it's going to be different and separate from doing a lateral border at another time. There usually, when someone comes in, it's one border that is the offensive border at the time, but that doesn't mean a couple months, couple weeks later, they can't have a problem with the other border. So using that same code, if it goes into the system, you're not going to know if it's the same medial border or if it's a lateral border as opposed to the one before, which may have been medial. So I think if there was some way to identify that, that may help in getting the limitations accepted by the community. I also I'm currently the president of South Carolina Podiatric Medical Association, and we spoke with our members and our board of directors to come up with a consensus about the limitations. Most of them we, along with APMA, do agree with, but the ones that are posing a problem, which are problematic, are the way you cannot indicate the medial lateral border, you cannot indicate partial versus total avulsion, and you run into the problems of, especially where I work, I deal with the elderly. 95% of my patients are elderly and diabetic. So you run into a problem with if there's going to be a payment that has to be made by the patient, if there's going to be some monetary hardship on them, they may choose not to get a procedure that they need, and that can potentially turn into something bigger, whether it's a severe infection, amputation, or even death in some cases if it's a diabetic or a vascularly compromised patient. So we don't want them to have to make those types of decisions based on money, based on having a bill after a procedure because of these limitations. So if Palmetto GPA could take those into consideration, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Thank you for those comments. And yes, again, this is an important part of the LCD process, and we take very seriously these comments. And just as a reminder too, and I know you have Dr. Smith and Dr. Harwood and the other providers on this call, if you need to, again, formal comments, the preferred way and the best way is through writing at a.policy@palmettogba.com. But we do appreciate that. Again, as I mentioned before, this is a very important part of the LCD process. We take this very seriously. Anyone else that would like to make any brief comments for any of our proposed LCDs?
Hello.
Hi, yes, this is, oh, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Hi, my name is Dr. Lemon. I'm also a podiatrist with Dr. Smith in the state of South Carolina. And I'll try to keep mine short and sweet, as I agree with my other colleagues in regards to the anatomy of the nail. You know, we could see a patient 1 week where it's on the medial border, and then 2 weeks later it's the lateral. So that's a big problem with limitations. And as my colleague said, these things can recur. So it's hard to say in 8 months, you know, it's never going to happen again. And I also want to hit home, as my colleague said, with our area, diabetes is prevalent, especially in our state of South Carolina. You know, we are sadly number one in a lot of bad things, including diabetic patients. And when these patients get these ingrown nails and the infection, and it becomes infected and it can spread to the bone, we're looking at possible osteomyelitis, which could lead to amputation. And as we know, when we get one amputation, it could lead to another one, which can lead to increased mortality, morbidity, and death. And there's already limitations with access to care in our state. So I think this LCD, if it goes through, it will sadly kind of further increase our statistics with amputations and infections in our diabetic patients, which is very prevalent in our state of South Carolina and our neighboring states and in this MAC area, as my colleague said, in the Southeast. You know, unfortunately, diabetes runs rampant, which increased the rate of infections in the skin, soft tissue, and bone in our members, in our patients. Thank you. And I submitted a comment via email, but I'll do it from a way before the due date of the 14th. But thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Dr. Stroud, could I ask a question?
Yes.
If this LCD does go through and there is some limitations, will there be some guidance on advanced beneficiary notice concerning that, okay, this procedure is not covered or may not be covered? Because I don't know how I would ever know if somebody had a nail procedure on that toe by another provider. Was it a permanent? Was it a non-permanent? A lot of patients aren't going to know what was coded. And a lot of seniors won't remember what toe was worked on, but will there be some guidance? Because, you know, in my area, I would probably, in Fairhope, Alabama, have them sign an ABN and say, here you go. It's going to be standard charge on anything that I do here, because I can't say if it's going to be covered or not. Of course, there would be some people that it would be a big problem, that the doctor from South Carolina would say that some people might just opt out and say, you know what, maybe I'll just try and live with this and see if it gets worse infected or not. I could see that scenario happen. Will there be some guidance on that? Because I don't want to overstep my bounds and have people signing things they shouldn't be. But if it's not covered, I assume it's just not covered. Will there be any guidance?
And this is Dr. Harwood, correct?
Yes, sir.
So, you know, we certainly, if we have policies that, you know, do become final, if there are any questions, what we would say to do usually is to reach out to Palmetto GBA with our provider outreach and education, and they would be able to provide you with the information, you know, hopefully that you would need. in cases like that, it's pretty much, it'd be sort of on an individual basis, but that would be the route to go. But again, that's this meeting and proposing these LCDs, one part of the process. And so we still need to go back and look at these comments. And again, like I said, we take these comments very seriously, look at these comments to see what needs to be done before, a policy can become final. I would have to say at this point, it is hypothetical, and what we would likely do is point you to our provider education outreach department.
All right, thank you.
Hello, this is Greg Maurer with Turing Pharmaceuticals. I missed the first 6 minutes and no problem listening to the recording. I just wanted to find out if there were any public comments regarding hyaluronic acid and the LCD criteria change.
We have had no comments for that policy.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Good meeting, everyone. Again, I appreciate everyone being on the call. Just to remind everyone, our JJ open meeting will be at 12:30 Eastern Time. At this time, I will go ahead and conclude our JM open meeting for May 2022. I thank everyone for joining us.